This is my second time speaking today, second time in this legislative session. I'll begin with Senator Brandis from the party. I'm speaking on the affirmation of this bill. Thank you. Nearly every single speech so far has referenced 1776. It's referenced our founding fathers, the war we fought for our independence. I stand on the affirmation today to ensure the war for independence does not have to happen again. We affirm for two key reasons. First, it strengthens our fight for justice. Second, it ensures national connectivity, which brings us to our very first contention. This bill provides democracy domestically and abroad. According to foreign policy on January 14, 2021, American foreign policy has always been hypercritical, and social change alone does not fix it. Representatives, the simple fact is that when the United States goes out on the world stage, it advocates for things like freedom of speech, freedom of religion, representation for different nations around the globe. The international community points at us, and points at Guam in Puerto Rico, and says, what about you, Uncle Sam? According to the Democracy Fund on January 4th of 2024, my constituents are firm believers of freedom. However, time and time again, this Congress has denied their beliefs onto our territories. And with the United Nations passing a resolution in 2023, stating that the international community at large agrees more with the cries of Puerto Ricans for independence than they do with this Congress, it's easy to say that the world pays attention to what this bill does. According to Cato Institute, hypocrisy weakens every single aspect of our foreign policy. Anytime the United States government goes out to seek beneficial change in the world, no one listens, or they listen less because we aren't willing to commit to the very things we're saying. Which brings us to our second contention. It generates national connectivity. Other representatives in the affirmation have mentioned things like aid and corruption, but it's something far more than where dollars go. No, it's who we can save with that funding. According to the Commission on Decolonization, part of the Guam government on March 1st of 2025, a page updated less than 2 hours ago, the government of Guam is outwardly seeking more representation. The Council on Foreign Relations tells us on January 8th of 2025 that Puerto Rico is doing the exact same thing. And it's not so they can have an idea what policy might be or listen to what we do, but rather have an actual impact on it. Because as the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities tells us in August of 2024, because those territories, Representative Mohan and Swihart, do not have votes, they aren't respected by the rest of Congress. Their beliefs aren't taken into consideration, and we run over their ideas. That leads to death. According to the International Rescue Commission on February 24th of 2025, due to our lack of respect for those territories, they receive less humanitarian aid funding from our federal government. Meaning, every hurricane that hits Puerto Rico goes unsolved.
Thank you, Representative. Speech time, 3 minutes, 10 seconds. Again, that's 3 minutes, 10 seconds. Questioners, rise. Representative Terabisci.
Great job, Representative, but can you please explain the logic behind Section 2 of this resolution?
Can you please read through what section?
Yeah, sure. Section 2, I'll summarize it, is the one that sets different dates for when these different territories are going to elect their senators.
Sure. It was just the discretion of the author to include certain areas now and certain areas then. I believe it might be loosely based off the population of those territories.
It doesn't reflect any sort of difference in the needs or wants of these unique territories?
I think it might be population based, but as I'm saying, in the long term, they do get a vote, which is the very reason why we must pass.
In the long term, they do give a vote.
In 2 years,
Mohan.
at the very least.
Can you give me a single example of their ideas not getting heard?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, a Puerto Rican delegation less than 5 weeks ago was denied counsel with representatives in the United States House of Representatives because they don't have a vote. They aren't respected.
All right, let's even move on then. So what's the thing that I told you? Is that federal taxation isn't a thing in territories, correct?
Every single person in territory would die for a vote if it meant they had to pay a little bit more in taxes.
That is the end of the question block. Thank you, Representative.
I think privilege
Yes,
to exit the chamber.
granted. Seeing as we left off on an affirmation speech, negation speakers, rise. That would go to Representative Terabisci.
Thank you. Well, again, my name is Representative Terry
words of U.S. Supreme Court justices written into legal decisions that still govern millions of Americans today. Over a century later, these racist rulings still stand, and now we're being asked to pass a resolution built on the same foundation without even acknowledging the cracks that run through it. Thus, we negate today for the following reasons. First, we cannot in good faith pass this resolution when there lies a racist, outdated relic of colonial rule deep within our institutions that the affirmation has either ignored or used as the basis for their arguments, Representative Mishra. The insular cases, a series of decisions handed down by the U.S. Supreme Court beginning in 1901 that sought to answer the question, does the Constitution follow the flag in regards to the annexed territories? Congressman Raul Rodolfo writes that the U.S. Supreme Court's decisions in the cases rest on racial views and stereotypes from the era of Plessy v. Ferguson. These characterizations, he wrote, are contrary to our nation's most basic constitutional and democratic principles and should be rejected as having no place in U.S. law. Furthermore, the U.S. insular cases are undoubtedly unconstitutional as they violate the foundational amendments to the Constitution approved after the Civil War that ensures citizenship rights to people upon whom the nation had inflicted a previous condition of servitude, according to Harvard Law in 2004. Just like Representative Morton said, this has always been hypocritical. Second, representatives, just like Representative Young conceded to in questioning, a blanket solution does not work. Each territory is different. Some want statehood, some want independence, some just want enhanced autonomy. Harvard Law further explains, for residents of some territories, a change in the status quo may be a less appealing possibility because other factors are more significant to their needs or wants. Third, this resolution sets a precedent for foreign influence in U.S. governance. Granting senatorial representation to territories could make it easier for foreign powers to influence national policy. Could territories with heavy foreign influence, such as Guam's reliance on China, create policy shifts that benefit foreign interests over U.S. citizens? The U.S. Institute of Peace warns in 2022 China is actively expanding its influence in the Pacific, targeting these strategic territories in the U.S. Fourth, the logical implications of this resolution are significant. The resolution never explicitly states whether senators from territories must be voting members. Moreover, this resolution, under the status quo of the territories, could allow a non-citizen senator to be seated because American Samoans are not citizens, they are American nationals. If this issue is not addressed, Congress could find itself with lawmakers who have no obligations to the American people, yet wield real political influence. Finally, the solution is clear, beginning with overturning the insular cases. In the 21st century, we ought to move further into developing what it means to have a separate relationship with the U.S. Ultimately, the question is not whether history will judge us for ignoring the insular cases. The question is, will we let it continue? Gates.
Thank you, Representative. Speech time 307. Again, for the judges, 307. Questioners, rise. That would go to Representative. Mishra.
Hi, Representative. You put in your speech that activists from these regions are seeking a variety of different causes for them.
Yes, Representative, according to Harvard Law.
Right, but given this legislation is giving an amount of representation to these people, wouldn't you agree that any amount of representation is better than no representation?
Representative, no, it's not solving the root crisis. Some of these territories want independence, some
All right,
want
but
statehood,
it's
some
not
of them
solving the
want...
root crisis, but it's giving them some representation, which you agree is better than the current situation, correct?
No, because in addition to that representation,
What's
it
the
doesn't...
net harm?
Representative, it's giving them imbalanced influence.
Representative Amend.
Representative, you said that passing this bill would expose us to senators who are not citizens, correct?
Yes.
But doesn't Section 3, Article 1 of the Constitution require that any senator be a citizen of the United States?
Exactly, Representative. This is an unconstitutional resolution. I'm saying that the resolution doesn't follow that, not that this was actually...
Well, but the resolution doesn't contravene the Constitution as it
Yes, it
exists
does,
currently,
Representative,
does
because
it?
we'll be electing senators from the American Samoa. They're not citizens.
Okay, but the resolution does not remove the requirement that senators need to be citizens, does it?
Yes, it does, Representative.
Where does it say in the resolution?
That is the end of the question block. Thank you, Representatives. Chair, thanks you. Seeing as that was a negation speech.
Point of personal privilege.
Yes,
To re-enter the chamber.
granted.
Thank you.
Seeing as that was a negation speech, we'll now be moving to affirmation speech. Speakers, rise. That would go to Representative Tooley.
I thank the chair. Hi guys, this is Representative Tooley, T-U-L-I, seated in seat 5, second time speaking, probably the last. I just get a quick thumbs up, I can start. Good, 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 good. Voting is subjective. At one moment, it could look like advocacy, and the next, complacency. It changes very fast. However, in congressional debate, it doesn't seem like it changes at all. Representative Ballamarugan can completely deep fry the AF, and then they will continue to vote on the side that they spoke on. It's time to realize that voting isn't just a game. It's about people that need representation. Reject stubbornness, pass this policy. Not primarily to give territories the power to negotiate. The biggest thing to note here is that the negation, spearheaded by Representative Swihart, tells you and continues to tell you that passing only decreases representation for the majority of mainland Americans. I want to spend the rest of my time delayering this approach very fast. So far, my side has told you that giving territories a seat allows them to pass policy and advocate for that helps their people. It's more than that. With power, territories won't just follow the agenda, they'll set it. But it's A10 Associates explains in 2024 that parties in Congress use earmarks to get other members to vote for their policy. For example, if a party doesn't have enough votes to pass one, they'll stroll over to Representative Dontal, and they'll say, we'll give you $10 million in water infrastructure, and heck, we'll even name a fire hydrant after you. And that turns his resounding no into an affirmative yes. Right now, these territories can't vote, meaning they're taking all of the negatives of this system without enduring a single positive. Passing shifts the paradigm, allowing them to benefit off of the system. Because earmarks aren't just about funding, they're leverage. And when territories have leverage, that means they can get what they need. The only question left is, does this work? Yes, it does. The Alaska Beacon explains in last June that Alaska shovels in $645 per person in earmarks. If we project this to this 3.6 million Americans living in territories, that's a minimum net impact of $2.3 billion. Here's why earmarks are uniquely important. A January 2024 research paper by Berkeley professors evaluates that earmarks specifically benefit low-income communities because these political parties know they need it the most. Representative Swihart and Terabishi, 5 senators out of 105 doesn't sound like a minority with major influence. It sounds like with a lot of influence. It sounds like a majority with major influence. It sounds like a minority that's not backed by China. Passing doesn't just give us tall fire hydrants and good infrastructure. It breaks a cycle of perpetual agony and suffering that these Americans continue to endure and have no say in their future. Pass this policy. Reject stubbornness.
Thank you, Representative. Speech time 2 minutes and 59 seconds. Again, for the judges, 2 minutes and 59 seconds. Questioners, ayes. Of those standing, that would go to Representative Martin.
So earmarks here. So I vote yes because I get $10 million in fire hydrant. Does that not sound like corruption?
No, it's happening right now. And even if it is, then it's still going to be benefiting them.
Representative, you are saying the affirmation today because accepting these territories will allow for more corruption.
It's already happening now. We're not going to change it because we can't outlaw it.
You're advocating for more of it, correct?
No, I'm advocating for our territories to be able to take advantage of it like every other state.
Ballamarugan.
You extrapolated on a statistic from Alaska to analyze the policy's impact on territories, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Could you please clarify how an analysis conducted in Alaska is applicable to all of our territories?
Okay, Alaska is a territory. They have 2 votes, just like all of these other territories, meaning the same thing can be applied.
These territories don't have 2 votes.
Okay, then they have 1 vote each.
Okay, so how does the economic analysis in
Okay,
Alaska apply to
cut
all
the
these
$1 billion
territories?
in half and it's still better than anything that the Nate can argue.
Is representation the same thing as economics?
Yes.
That is the end
By
of the
earmark
questioning block.
I think
That
it's
being said, I will now call for an negation speech. Speakers, ayes. That would go to Representative Dontal.
Hi everyone, my name is Representative Don Tall. My last name is spelled D-A-N-T-A-L. As always, I'm at the leisure of those above me. Just a nod sign or a smile. I'll begin. Americans dumped tea in harbors and spilled British blood because of taxation without representation. I'm sure Representative Young would have been a part of it. 250 years later, we overcorrected. Now, we're the ones giving out representation without the responsibility of taxation. Americans proved how dangerous unfair representation can be with Britain's parliament. Don't make Congress their next target. Fail, because low-income Americans and states will pay the brunt of fiscally irresponsible senators in Congress, since we're granting representation to constituencies that don't have the responsibility of being taxed. Now, we've heard a whole lot about taxation today. So, let's set the record straight. Territorial residents don't pay a federal income tax. They only pay Medicare and Social Security taxes. That's why the National Statistics of Income Report, published on January 23rd of this year, quantifies that territorial residents pay 11 times less in federal taxes than stateside Americans do. That's important when we consider representation. The affirmative, spearheaded by Representative Young, Mishra, and Martin, all have impacts that stem from the solvency of increasing our representation. Here's the issue. That's inequitable representation, because it's going to untaxed constituencies who will have fiscally irresponsible senators. A global study by the National Bureau of Economic Research finds in October of 2022 that policymakers are 74% more likely to be fiscally irresponsible if their territories won't be taxed and responsible for funding a program. That's what territories are. That means these territorial senators are going to be fiscally irresponsible. So in the end, Representative Young, Mishra, and Martin are all incorrectly weighing the scope of today's debate. They've only focused on the territorial residents and completely neglected the stateside Americans. Because when spending skyrockets from Congress, so do taxes, especially on low-income Americans in U.S. states. A report from the Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy, published on October 7th of 2024, states that increasing spending by just 1% from 2023 would mean a 5% hike in taxes for low-income Americans in states. That's a $1,100 increase in taxes. That's like a whole carton of eggs. But really, weigh the comparative. Representative Mishra, Martin, and Young, territorial residents won't pay a dime for their senators. Stateside Americans will. In the end, it's your choice, whether you'll be a George Washington or a King George.
Thank you, Representative. Speech time 309. Again, for the judges, 309. Questioner, Rob. Now we go to Representative Young.
Even when we pass, there's still going to be a time frame until these territories can actually create policy to help their territories. So why can't, in that time frame, we increase taxation on those territories after we give them representation?
Two things. There's no guarantee we pass that. And second, we can only tax if a place is a state.
Okay, but
constitutionally.
But these people are under our control, and they already technically have benefits from federal statutes. Why don't we just increase representation and increase taxation?
Mishra.
Okay, Representative, let's assume these senators are financially irresponsible for these territories. Are there not still 100 senators representing states and Americans who check their financial irresponsibility?
They're going to be the tie-breaking votes, though.
Necessarily, Representative, they're always going to be the tie-breaking vote.
Regardless, I don't think we should be purposely putting irresponsible
It's
senators with inequitable representation in our
Senate. They will
Senate.
be irresponsible, correct? Where would you prove they will necessarily be financially irresponsible?
I gave you a study that said they're going to be 74% more irresponsible.
They're still just 5%.
That is the end of the question log. Thank you, Representative. Seeing as that was an engagement speech, affirmation speakers, ayes. Of those, Representative Juan opposed.
I thank the chair. Okay, hello everyone. I am Representative Waugh. That is spelled once again just like laugh, but instead of an L and a W, and pronounced slightly differently. This will be my second time speaking today, second time this legislative session. I'll begin when I get a signal. Let's start. Good. Judges. Okay. So somewhere inside all of us is the power to change the world. These words have been uttered throughout our history and remain just as relevant today as they will tomorrow. Today, when we amend the Constitution to provide inhabited territories and senatorial representation, we ensure that every American, regardless of where they live, will have a voice in the laws that affect them. So we pass. So first, the injustice of denying territorial residents Senate representation is compounded by their high levels of military service. According to the Department of Defense, United States territories have some of the highest rates of enlistment per capita. Guam, for instance, has a higher rate of military enlistment than any single United state. Yet citizens of Guam lack a single senator with a vote to advocate for veteran benefits, military policy, or the fate of military bases that shape their local economies. It is fundamentally undemocratic that these citizens are expected to fight and die for a nation that denies equal representation in its legislative body. So second, a lack of Senate representation has real economic consequences. United States territories receive less federal funding per capita than states, despite facing worsening economic challenges such as recovery from Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico and the impact of United military expansion in Guam. Without senators that have a vote to advocate for territorial interests, infrastructure funding, disaster relief, and economic development will take a back seat to state concerns. Representative Mohan, I can understand the point that you were trying to make. However, with a voting senator, without a voting senator, territories do not have a true, secure influence in the Senate. According to a 2022 report by the Congressional Research Service, territories are frequently at a disadvantage when negotiating federal policies already, especially when it comes to their economies. And this is when it includes minimum wage laws, tax incentives, and Medicaid funding.